Alright, let's start another new file. In this file, start by pressing L to switch to the line tool. Start at the bottom left corner of your screen, click once, move your mouse up somewhere towards the middle top of your screen, click a second time. You've drawn an edge now. Let's continue drawing now down in the right bottom area, click again, and then bring your cursor back to the original endpoint and click again. So you've drawn one large triangle by drawing 3 edges with the line tool, and that surface filled in. Okay, let's draw another triangle with the line tool. Hover along this left edge somewhere towards the bottom, click once, move your mouse out into the white space area here, click again, and then move your mouse back to the edge till you get that on edge inference and click again. So here we drew 2 edges, and that surface filled in because that third edge there was already drawn in. It was the long edge. Now before we continue drawing a few more triangles, let's switch to the Select tool. Press the space bar on your keyboard. That will switch you to the Select tool, which is this arrow icon. With the Select tool, try this. Click once on the surface on the left, and you'll notice that it highlights blue, or it has this sort of polka dot subtle blue highlight. Click instead now on the bigger surface and notice how it changes, and it's highlighted blue. It's what's selected. Click on the edge and it will highlight blue instead, so any of the edges will highlight blue. Now you'll notice something. This surface here is divided when you click on one of the surfaces and the other surface. This surface is divided into 2 different surfaces by this shared edge here. So if you click on this edge, it's the shared edge that's dividing these 2. Now what's interesting though is, remember, if you click on the right edge, this long edge, we drew one long edge with the line tool. Well, we did the same thing on the left-hand side, but now if you click over there, it's actually been divided up into 3 sub-edges. So when you clicked with the line tool here to set an endpoint, and then drew out and back and clicked here to set an endpoint, you actually put an endpoint here and an endpoint here, which subdivided this longer edge into 3 smaller edges. And this middle edge here is what allows this surface to be separate from this surface. So this might all seem like it doesn't matter too much, but starting to see how this geometry works together here in simplified 2D space will help us a bunch as we get more complicated with what we draw next. So press L to switch back to the line tool. Let's draw a triangle off the right-hand side. Click once on the edge, click again somewhere out in white space, move your mouse back to the edge and click again. And then we'll draw one more triangle on the bottom. So start at the bottom left endpoint, click once. This time move your mouse inside on the face. You'll notice anywhere on that face, if you stop for a moment, you'll get this blue on face inference. Go ahead and click somewhere where you have that inference. And then move your mouse down to the bottom right endpoint and click again. Okay, press the spacebar on your keyboard to switch back to the Select tool. And again, if you click around now on these faces, you'll notice how they've been subdivided by the edges that you've been drawing. And you can click around on the edges to see how they're constructed now, how they've been broken up on the right-hand side here, especially this right edge here, where you can click on the 3 segments as it's now been divided by the endpoints that you set for that triangle. Okay, so why does all this matter? Well, press E for the eraser tool. And because we've drawn a bunch of geometry that's overlapping or attached to each other, we can edit it in a few different ways. So first, with the eraser tool, let's erase this bottom edge. And we might expect that. The edge went away, and so did the face. But these edges stayed there because they're defining this shape here. Now, let's also erase away this edge here and this edge over here. Okay, so that's no big deal. We got rid of a couple of edges. Press spacebar to switch back to the Select tool and click once on the face, and notice that it all selects as one. So even though we'll subdivide things in SketchUp, once you've gotten rid of certain edges, that face will automatically merge up and it'll turn into one face. So there's no scars left behind where we have separate faces. So SketchUp will attach and overlap and stick the geometry together. And then when you erase things away, it'll just automatically merge things up the best it can to keep the model intact. Again, might not matter too much to you right now, but all of these concepts will make a big deal later. Okay, so with the select tool, just click once in white space to make sure you don't have anything selected. And in this example, we're going to talk about a new tool called the Move tool. Press M on your keyboard. M stands for Move. You'll notice that the icon selected here has arrows pointing in 4 directions. Now, let's not click yet. Just with the Move tool, hover over the surface, and you'll notice that it actively selects. Now, if you hover off of the surface, it's not selected like you would with the Select tool. It's just that when you hover over it, SketchUp says, maybe you're going to want to move this face. But before you do that, hover over an edge, and you'll notice that it actively highlights. So you'll see that it turns blue. In this case, though, I want you to hover over the face and click once and let go of your mouse button. Then move your mouse around, and you'll notice you're moving this entire object. Then click anywhere to set it down. Okay, so with the Move tool, it moves this entire object. No big deal, right? We'll try this. Hover over one of the edges instead, click on it, and now move your mouse around. And you'll notice that the Move tool isn't always doing what you'd expect. So let's go ahead and click to set that edge down somewhere. And what I mean by that is you might think of the Move tool as something that you want to move entire objects with. But really, it's editing the place of the geometry that you click on. So for example, if you click on this face and you edit the place of it, meaning you move that face, all of its edges come along for the ride. So it looks a little bit more like what you'd expect. You're moving the whole object. I'll click to set that down. But if you edit the place of an edge, so hover over that edge and click on it, notice the edge stays the same length, and it also stays oriented in the same direction. Its 2 endpoints are what defines that edge, so then those endpoints are shared by some attached edges. Those attached edges have to sort of update so they can get longer or shorter, or they move positions or orientations, and then the rest of this shape stays the same. It just stays put. Let's go ahead and click to set that down somewhere. Now hover over an endpoint with the Move tool, click on it, and then move your mouse around. You can move an endpoint. The 2 edges that are sharing that endpoint have to update, and everything else just stays put. Click to set that down somewhere. So with the Move tool, you'll find later down the line, you'll have frustrating moments where you'll think to yourself, I want to move this over a foot, and you'll just click any old spot and wonder why you've messed up that shape. If you're in the middle of doing something you don't want to do in SketchUp, for example, we're in the middle of starting to move an edge when we didn't mean to, remember you can hit the Escape key on your keyboard, and that will let go of that operation in progress. So let's talk about the best way to use the Move tool. When you plan to move an entire object, or you want to move something very specific, I suggest you pre-select it with the Select tool. So press the spacebar on your keyboard to switch to the Select tool. Click once on the surface of this shape, then press M for the Move tool. And you don't even have to click on the shape. So for example, click over to the side in white space here and move your mouse, and notice that that pre-selected thing is the only thing that you can move. Go ahead and click to set it down somewhere. Similarly, press the spacebar on your keyboard to switch to the Select tool. Try clicking on an edge to select just that edge. And say you want to move just a few edges together. So maybe this is some funky looking floor plan of something, and you want to move just the right set of edges over a few feet. With the Select tool, hold down the Shift key on your keyboard. Notice you get a little plus minus symbol next to the cursor. And go ahead and click on each new edge you want to add to the selection set. If at any point you click and you realize you've picked the surface by accident, or perhaps you've picked too many edges, just keep that Shift key held down and click on the surface again to deselect it or to remove it from the selection set. You can do the same with edges, so if I have one edge too many, I can deselect one of them. When you're all done, you can let go of the Shift key. So with your pre-selected set of edges, I've selected these 4 here. Now press M for the Move tool. And again, you can click anywhere. Click once and move your mouse and you'll notice that you're able to move it in any direction, but you could move it, for example, in the red direction some amount. We're not going to worry about the exact amount of feet right now. Just click to set it down. So whenever you know exactly what you want to move, I suggest that you pre-select it with the Select tool. Now let's talk about selection with the Select tool for just a moment. Press spacebar for the Select tool again. If at any point you have a selection, you can click once in white space and it will deselect all of that stuff. There are a few ways that we can select this object. Click once on the surface and you'll get the entire surface. Notice though that the edges aren't selected. Double click on the surface and you'll get the surface and all of the connected edges. So a double click on this 2D shape is the best way to get the entire thing selected. Again, if you don't want to select anything at all, click once in white space. Now another way to select is hover up in white space up in the left area here, click, hold down, and drag your mouse across towards the bottom right and let go. It gets everything that's entirely inside that selection window. So these edges were entirely inside, but if I redo that one more time, you'll notice that as I'm dragging this along, notice up there at the top, so up here at this corner of this shape, notice how that corner isn't entirely inside. So when I let go, this edge here is not entirely inside, and this edge here is not entirely inside. So when I let go here, you notice that neither of those two edges were selected. But these four edges were contained entirely inside. Also, the surface was not entirely inside that window, which is why that surface is not selected. On the other hand, try this. Move towards the upper right white area, click, hold down, and drag a selection window that's going down and to the left. And notice before you let go, notice roughly what this selection window is touching. I'll let go here. It got everything, and that's because everything that that selection window touches will be selected. So the surface, even though it wasn't entirely inside, I'll do that again. Notice the surface is not entirely inside, but since this touches it, it'll get it. And even though some of those edges aren't entirely inside, this touches every edge, so it'll get everything. So this is a crossing selection when you go from right to left. And then when you go from left to right, this is just a regular selection window. So there's a difference there. Okay, that all being said, go ahead and click again in white space to deselect everything. We know that we can pre-select things that we want to move, but let's say we want to use the Move tool to edit this shape and make it look a little different. Press M for the Move tool again, and I want you to spend a minute or two and try to turn this shape into as nice of a star as you can using only the Move tool. Now, I'll start doing it myself here. You can go ahead and pause if you want to challenge yourself to do it alone first, or you can follow along with me. Remember, you can move edges, so I'll click on this edge and move it over, and then click to let go. You can move endpoints, so I'll click on this endpoint here and move it over a bit, and click to let go. And try this. You can also make sure to infer the position of certain things. So for example, let's say that I wanted to line up this bottom endpoint with this top endpoint so that they were in line with one another. I'll hover over this top endpoint here just to remind SketchUp that that's something I'm inferring. And then I'll hover over this bottom endpoint and click on it and move my mouse over in the red direction. And notice that at some point I might expect a dotted green line to shoot down. But if it doesn't, don't click, hover over that top endpoint and move your mouse down, and notice now that I get that dotted green inference. Go ahead and click somewhere below to set that down, and now you know this endpoint is in line with this endpoint. So I'll continue doing that a little bit more quickly here. I'll click on this endpoint, move the mouse over, and hover over till I see that endpoint inference, and then move back in the red direction and click somewhere there where I've got that red inference, and continue doing this all the way around. Click once, let go of the mouse, hover over the endpoint, move back in the red direction here, and click to set it down. Click, hover over, move over, and click. And I won't be able to make this star perfect. There's some angular things going on here that I won't be able to infer. Like I can't infer at this angle really easily, at least not with the skills we've got yet. That's okay. I'll just click around and get it looking something somewhat close to what a star might look like. And you notice that I'm using the endpoints primarily. I could move the edges too, but moving the endpoints is probably a little bit quicker. So remember again, the Move tool is great for moving edges, endpoints, and faces. When you're just clicking around with the Move tool without pre-selecting anything, then think of it as you're using it as an editing tool. And whenever you need to move the entire object, even though we can tell that we can move this by just clicking on the face, I still recommend you get in the habit of switching to the Select tool, spacebar for the Select tool, double-clicking on this surface to pick the whole thing, then press M for Move, and remember at that point you can click anywhere on the object or off to move it around, and then click to set it back down again.